Welcome to Sullivan Street, the Banshee episode, where we will talk all about the Banshee Tour with Dashboard Confessional and our own experiences going to the shows. But first, as always, let's say hi to my co host. Now, Chris, usually I start this off by saying, "Hey, Chris, how are you today?" But this is not a normal "How are you today?" because less than 24 hours ago, you actually saw the Crows live in concert.
Yeah, I'm definitely great. You didn't have
Because
to
of
add,
that.
it was no question that I was going to be pretty great if I had real good tickets to see Counting Crows last night and they played for 2 hours and it was a delight. So, what am I going to do? Feel down about that?
No, that sounds great, and I'm looking forward to. I mean, that's pretty much what we're going to start. I mean, we have a couple of things we want to talk about on the show today. So we are, because it just happened, we're going to talk to Chris about his live in-person review of the show yesterday, which I actually looked up. What's the name of the town? It's on Long Island, right? That you went?
It's what yeah, Jones Beach. Jones Beach is the place on Long Island. The city is technically Wantagh.
Right,
Um
right, right.
it's but it's people know it as Jones Beach. I growing up, I until I got old enough to start looking at tour dates and understand that, like, see, like, oh, Jones Beach, and see, like, Wantagh next to it. And I don't think I knew that Wantagh was the name of anything.
Right.
So
So we will talk about your experience in Wantagh last night, less than 24 hours ago. Then we're going to talk about all the news that's been happening and just our thoughts, reflections on this Banshee tour. And there actually is quite a lot to talk about. Then I will get into my experience seeing, I guess you could say, the tour kickoff, which I actually went to the Hollywood show at the Troubadour. So there are a lot of exciting things to talk about. And then we will get into a review of a past show in Hollywood. More details about that in a bit. But Chris, why don't you start us off? And I do want to say that I actually counted right before we started the podcast, and I believe it was show number 14 out of about 55, 56 dates that they are doing on this tour. So it is a long tour, like you said earlier. And yeah, so your thoughts?
they're early in the tour. I first of all thought they sounded great. One of the things that we'll talk about a little bit is like the sort of variety of the songs. And one of the things I think sometimes that gets confused when people are talking about a band, especially like hardcore fans, is they'll get like, "Oh, it's Omaha again." Okay, yeah, but and variety doesn't isn't the same as quality, right? And while people
Yes.
who want to see the band a lot and have at different times might sometimes have a comment about variety, the band sounded fantastic kind of all the way through. I thought Adam was in really good voice. Particularly, again, it was kind of a rough evening. It was just kind of a muggy evening.
Okay.
The kind of night where you're like, I feel bad for a band playing 2 hours when, like, standing here is kind of a little bit
Oh, right.
oppressive. You're kind
Yeah.
of like, I'm sweating pretty hard just like standing and existing and watching this, which
Yeah.
means if you're under lights and like actively performing for 2 hours, this is probably a pretty long night. Um but uh but yeah, they opened, I think, a subtle nod to us, Eric. They
That's
opened with Sullivan Street.
I was gonna text you that last night, and I was like, "That is really nice for Adam to start with
Yeah.
Sullivan Street, acknowledging the hard work we're putting into this podcast."
And I was kind of hoping because they've mostly opened with that around here on this tour. Mrs. Potter's once or twice, and maybe back at the front there might have been something else that maybe came out as the opener. But they've mostly been sticking to those two, and I love hearing Sullivan Street, and they have so great to see
It's
them.
a great starter, right? It really is.
Yeah, I think a great way. I really like, I think you said, when they play that sort of slower song to really bring and build the tempo there. And I think especially the way they play Sullivan Street now, I think
Yes.
it really is a great starter. Um, they went into Richard Manuel. I should pull the set list up. They went into that'd be a good thing for me to do. They uh they went then into Mr. Jones, which is,
They like playing Richard Manuel a lot. I guess I don't have a lot of thoughts about it. I always found it interesting that that seems to be one of their. I guess it officially was a single of theirs.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just an interesting. They obviously like that song.
Yeah, and I like it too. I mean, I was kind of just being at Jones Beach. I'm always kind of hoping for like hard candy in that space. Just that song's
I was
literally about.
actually about to say that. I can't because I can see them not pulling that if it's not something they play, but they play Hard Candy a lot. So I'm so surprised that they didn't play that there.
But they're not a band that always does the song, in the.
I know my friend thinks that they are, but they are not. And I think when it happens, it just kind of is lucky. Yeah, I've been to DC a couple times, the area, at least that DC metro area, and they want them to play St. Robinson because they mentioned like the shores of the
Chesapeake.
Chesapeake and stuff like that. But I think it's more luck when it happens than
They did actually. I realized I just looked at. They did play. They when they played Long Island last summer. They did, which was not at Jones Beach. It was in like a club called the Paramount. They did play Hard Candy. So they sometimes it's not they always avoid it. But yeah, it's not a guarantee that they're going to play it.
Oh, one thing I did want to ask. I'm guessing it was sold out or to
No,
capacity or
actually, it was
oh.
not. So it was. I haven't looked at the rest of the tour in terms of ticket sales. I don't tend to focus on that. But while it was a good sized crowd, there was definitely the very upper area was pretty open, and there were definitely some open spaces. I actually ended. I sort of stalked out tickets, and I was able to buy for sort of the like regular price after all the premium VIP and whatever had fallen off. I bought second row tickets yesterday or Friday, the day before the show, which
And
was
you
nice.
had tickets before, though, right?
No, I hadn't bought them because I was like, I want to be in
Oh.
the first section, and I saw that they hadn't all sold very quickly, and I was like, I know I'm gonna be able to get something pretty good, and I'll just kind of wait this out, and that ended up paying off fairly well.
So even though you told me a month ago you were going to this show, you actually didn't have tickets until the day of the show.
And that is a difficult emotional thing for me. And I could talk to you for like hours about how I feel about Ticketmaster and the fact that they've basically made it like a wait. Like they've put so much on concert goers where they put so much of the risk on us by like jumping the prices up at the beginning and then dropping them towards the end. Like they basically act like a scalper now. Um, and obviously, look, I don't want to totally derail the show. I'm a believer. Absolutely, you should get whatever price you can for the tickets, and that should go to the band and not actual scalpers. But it is a frustrating thing I find. I like getting on during the pre-sale and just buying the tickets and being like, I'm going to the show, as opposed to waiting at the last minute. But that's kind of where we're at for like concert tickets now for things that aren't going to actually like fully sell out.
But no, you have me thinking because you have me thinking that if maybe for us like really hardcore Crows fans, including our audience, that maybe if you can get in the pre-sale, great, and if not, it does not hurt to wait to the day of.
Well, and part is you got to watch it, right? You just kind of got to see like because again, I'm not looking at every show, and every show is in different. This is Jones Beach. It's a theater that holds over 10,000. I think it's
Oh, I
like
didn't realize that.
13,000.
Okay, that's quite a
Yeah,
big. Yeah.
it's a big, outdoor theater on the
Okay.
water. Um, and so there's a lot of space there. And so if you're going to a show that's in a bigger space, again take a look and maybe keep an eye out there and you know actually, but so the fun thing is, so Mr. Jones, I teased this to you when we texted yesterday, Eric.
Yes.
I told you I had a moment with Adam. I had an Adam thing to talk about. So I was in the second row. I was wearing a reproduction of a vintage "Recovering the Satellites" T-shirt, and Adam sits down on the amp or the monitor pretty in front of me during one of the slower parts of Mr. Jones. And he kind of like looks and he can see my t-shirt. He sees my t-shirt. And I'm like, I think he's looking at me. And he's like points at it and kind of gives it like a very nod of approval, kind of like a thumbs up, and then like goes about the song. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
apparently he
that's great.
likes vintage Counting Crows t-shirts. So yeah, that was a nice moment. I
Right,
was
because
close enough that he could literally just look at me and go like, oh, I like that guy's t-shirt.
no, it's funny. They did a Recovering the Satellites like redo T-shirt last year, but it's not with the Satellites logo. I don't know if you saw it. It's almost like I think it's an LP logo or something.
Mm.
But you're right. I haven't seen someone with a vintage, which I used to own one of those Recovering the Satellite T-shirts in a long time. So I'm glad he appreciated that.
He was, yeah, he's appreciated. I'd love to, again, maybe if we ever get him on the show, we'll talk, because he loved, the one thing I know that I could talk to Adam Duritz about if I needed to would be vintage band t-shirts, because he seems to really like
Yes,
band t-shirts.
and
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 I also
and
really like band t-shirts. So
yeah, and so does Bryson's always wearing, right? He likes to wear Ramones. There's a couple that he
yeah,
likes to
yeah.
wear, and I think I've seen Millard. Well, Millard changes it up. He has different kind of vintage T-shirts, but I've seen him with some band T-shirts as well, which I've never seen Charlie or Jim wearing band T-shirts, for instance. So,
No, that's right. Yeah. Um,
okay.
so after that, Jones, they went into colorblind. And that's interestingly, this is kind of a spot, and we'll talk about this maybe more later. It's kind of a spot where they always have done. Adam's been talking a lot during this tour, and here he said, "Look, I promised too many songs to people, so I can't talk." But what he did mention, one of the things he has been saying a bunch on this tour, is he's talking about Butterfly in Reverse, and how it's a song that his girlfriend, asked them to play. Nagged
Right.
is the word he used. I'm not using that word.
Right.
He but asked him to play. And last night, interestingly, which I hadn't heard him say before, he said that he is there's another song she's been asking him about, but he's still really into playing Butterfly in Reverse. Now I'm curious what that song is.
Oh, is it
My mind went to like, what could she be demanding?
that would maybe be in the genre or something of Butterfly, like, right? Someone, right? I know what you're saying. Someone who would not randomly, but pick that song out as being underplayed. What other song are they? Yeah, I'm so curious. Right? Yeah.
If I have to guess,
Yep.
and I'll go on record saying this, and we'll see, because
Yeah.
eventually I assume he will break down and we'll play it. My guess is Amy Hit the Atmosphere.
Oh, and yes, and I hope that that's what it is. I think that's exactly, yeah. That's a great call. I was going to, like, something I didn't believe but was hopeful. I was going to say Barely Out of Tuesday,
Mm.
which for some reason I just think that she would like the song, but right, that has other, right,
But that would be
quirky and
ballsy.
stuff.
She's like,
Yeah,
look, I feel very secure in this relationship, and so
right.
I want you to play this song you wrote with an ex.
I think Amy Hit the Atmosphere is exactly right. So I'll join the bet with you. We can
We'll
go
keep.
in on that.
But yeah, they're Butterfly in Reverse, Omaha. Um, but then interestingly, kind of a longer section in the middle here than they have played in other places. I Wish I Was a Girl, which I always really liked, which Adam
I
introduces
I
a song about disconnection.
I love that song
It's a
live.
great song.
And this is a song that I thought was in their heyday, or when they only had 3 or 4 albums, I thought was like a, for Crow standards, was like a 5 out of 10 song, and like, I like it. It's fine. But now I absolutely love that song, and there's so many subtle improvements in the live version. I think now, I don't know if you catch, like, they do more effects with the guitars and stuff like that, adding, yeah. So anyway, i
What I actually
i
noticed in
love it.
this, Imi was playing a very cool, like, clear guitar that he did not play for anything else, but he played it for I Wish I Was a Girl. It was very, very cool looking. And part of what I thought was interesting, and I hadn't noticed it before, he's playing slide at times on the song, but not at others. So that might be part of the sort of effect aspect of where you're hearing the slide versus not hearing the slide guitar. But I thought it was a really, I really like that song. And
Yeah, for
Yeah,
those that don't like, at least in my, you can compare their studio version to, even if you listen to the one, so it's 5 years ago now, but there's a video on the official channel for I Wish I Was a Girl from the 25 Years and Counting tour, and it's pretty close to what they play now. And as I said, that anyway, I think it's a great version. So
yeah.
okay.
And then right into a song that's actually, and Adam didn't mention this, but it's a pair in a sense, which is Goodnight Elizabeth. And a pair, for those who don't know the story, right? Goodnight Elizabeth is about the girl that Adam was dating when when they went on the August and Everything After tour.
Yep.
And I Wish I Was a Girl is about the same relationship, right? The idea that she wouldn't believe him, that he wasn't cheating. Um, and But yeah, so Goodnight Elizabeth, again, also it's one of my, when we talk about recovering the satellites, I could talk for hours about Goodnight Elizabeth and all the million versions of that song. I always love that song. I think it's one of the uh it's one of the, like, heart songs of, like, I think if you love the Crows, it to me is one of their, like, most Crowsy songs, right? The
Yes.
heart of that song is very much like someone who loves Counting Crows. I can't imagine who loves this band that wouldn't love the last verse of this song If you wrap yourself in daffodils, I will wrap myself in pain. If you're the queen of California, I'm the king of the rain. I can't imagine who's not like doesn't get excited for that if you happen to love. I can imagine people who don't like that. I just can't imagine both liking Counting Crows and not liking that.
I do know that for it'll be interesting when we review Recovering the Satellites. It is my impression, and I'm not saying it's that high on my list. It's my impression that is for a lot of Crows fans, that's their favorite song from that album. So yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
By the way,
I'm
when
not
you
sure if it's
mentioned
my number one. I'll think about it, but it's certainly one of my favorites.
when you just because I'll throw it here because you mentioned it, I forgot about the connection between the two. I wish it was a girl, Goodnight Elizabeth. But remember that I mentioned that when I first heard Desert Life, it was like that I was on a road trip right when it was
Mm-hmm.
released, and we listened to it over and over. But I think it was the first time or the second time we listened to it, and my friend looks at me after during Wish I Was a Girl and said, "Boy, that Elizabeth must have really screwed him over." Like he said it just so subtly. So because he always loved Goodnight Elizabeth. Okay, so
It's true. Sometimes some of those relationships they linger, right? The other interesting thing I will note just about the way they've been playing this song on this tour. Obviously, they've still been doing Pale Blue Eyes in the middle, but one thing I noted, and I don't recall them doing it in the 2021 versions, and if I heard them play it last year, I don't recall them doing it. Um, he's gone back to using at the end of the second verse, singing "The Moon is a Satellite," which he had dropped
mm,
for so long, and that's
mm,
kind of slipped back in. Although I actually think that must be recent. I don't even think that was in there. I feel like I would have picked up on it on the XM show that you went to, which we'll talk about more. They did open with that song. And I think he's at some point in the last month or so, something popped into his head and he likes that line again. He
mm.
sounds great belting it out. So they went into Miami, a bit of a shorter version than they've been doing on this tour. I think because he said they've got too many songs, but they've in a lot of the versions of Miami on this tour, they've been telling the sort of long version of the story in the middle, where Adam talks about the story that again, if
Oh
you
right.
have heard you may have heard, right, which is he's what's behind the song, right? He's waiting in Miami. His girlfriend's plane is coming down. Um, it looks like it's flying into the sun. That gives him this feeling of foreboding, and then the relationship ends, and it ends badly, and he is left thinking to himself, if you knew that this was all going to be screwed up, well, what would you do, right? Which is which well, again, we'll talk about Miami at some point, really detailed, but I always love that. I think it's a beautiful that middle of the song is beautiful, and I really loved. There was when they were developing that. It's crazy to think it's 15 years now. 2008 was when they started doing that, and they were doing it every night, and it was before that became kind of a standard in the middle of the song, and so they were kind of working it out. And I really love a lot of those versions of the song because and those if you get a Nug subscription, all of the 2008 tour is on Nugs, friends. So you can go back and listen to just a bunch of Miamis from 2008 and see if you agree with me or not about that. Those are good. After that, they went into a song. We talked on the first episode, right, about how first question to me, Eric, it was talk about like seeing a white whale, and I was like, I'd been chasing the song Speedway for 10 years.
Oh, I forgot that you said that. That was one
And
of
then they
your.
finally played it last year in Port Chester, and it was a really nice moment because I'd been like hoping to see them play it for so long. And then the next year, I go see them again. They play Speedway again. Maybe
And
I'm a
they've
magnet for this thing. Now I'm going to see it for decades. I love the song. I was super happy to see it. A lot of people sat down around me around this song, which again, I said it was really hot, and I think people were getting a little tired. And it's certainly a less popular and slow song, but
yeah,
I love that song, and
you
I
were
was
happy to
really
see
glad.
it. Yeah.
I was stoked to see them play that, and he sounded great. He introed it by talking about how the Ben's original name for it before it had a name was, you should just call it "I'm out of here, you bitch."
Oh, that's
Um,
funny. Oh, well, that's interesting so he mentioned Ben, the previous
he
drummer.
mentioned Ben.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I've never heard him mentioned ever in any interview or on any show. So that's interesting by itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very rarely. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, he does not talk about Ben a lot, but he mentioned in that context here. After that, and this is an interesting one for me, they played Washington Square.
Okay, which is a New York song.
Well, and I was thinking about this. So the first time I saw the Crows was August of 2003. So almost exactly 20 years ago. We're 6 weeks or so shy of that at Jones Beach. So same place, because it's where I went to a lot of concerts, growing up. And that night that I went to see them was the first time they played Washington Square. So here I am
Okay.
20 years later.
Yeah.
They're still playing the song. I'm still going to see Counting Crows shows. It was kind of a
Right,
nice,
right.
kind of like full circle moment. It was also kind of interesting because I was thinking like I had second row last night, as I mentioned. The first time I was at almost the very, very top of that place. Like we were like, it was a hike. And unlike, so Jones Beach, it's interesting. So most of this kind of shed venues that you would go to in the summer, they are flat, right? They basically, they go upwards a little bit, but there's a big lawn at the back. Jones Beach doesn't have a lawn. Jones Beach is like vertical. It's like stands. So it goes, there's like multiple sections, but it goes up, 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 and up. And so if you are in the upper level, you are one very, very far away from the stage. But it's actually kind of a cool. It's I was talking about my wife about this last night because it's like you're right on the water. You are right on the ocean, and when you're up close, obviously you lose the benefit of that because you don't see the behind you. It's on the sides of you. But if you're up at the top, it's actually kind of beautiful on a summer evening because you're kind of taking in. You see the boats on the water and people. It's kind of a nice view from a little bit further back that you kind of lose when you're close. So uh, pluses and minuses in that regard.
Okay.
Also makes, which we'll talk about later, but they um, obviously they played a long December and it does make the line, "It's been so long since I have seen the ocean," feel very wrong. Because
Right,
you just
you're
kind of want to
seeing it
scream out
right
like, it's
there.
right there. It's
That's
over there.
funny.
I can see the ocean as we speak. You saw the ocean. It had to have been no more than 90 minutes ago. Has not been that long. Um, yeah, after that they played Big Yellow Taxi. A note here. Um, we had noticed through the evening that there were a couple of children, one kind of like teenager, one maybe a little bit shy of a teenager, who had been coming out and handing the guys the guitars. And my wife and I were kind of making jokes about like, oh, child labor a little bit, guys. Jeez,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is
right, right.
I know times are hard in terms of like getting crew members here, but I mean, we
But what
gotta.
I'm guessing you're about to say, and I've seen them so many times, they've never had a child doing anything like that, and they have a set crew, so there's something probably special going on, and that's probably what you're getting at.
Yeah, so on Big Yellow Taxi, Dave Bryson plays Shakers,
Yes,
and it hits me. So he sets up behind not Dan, behind Jim to play the shaker into like a
yes,
mic there,
yep.
and those two children join him also playing shakers. And when you look at the two children, they look, I don't know, a fair bit like Dave Bryson. So
Oh,
when
that's
you look at them,
funny.
I think these were Dave's two kids
Right, they're
joining
probably
them
on
on
summer
tour
break. Yep, yep,
on summer
exactly.
break. And it was a very nice moment to watch him lead them in
Aw,
doing the shaker bit on Big Yellow Taxi. It was really sweet because it's, he's
yeah, that's cool.
had them practice. He's like, look, we're going to get this right, guys.
But
We're going
but
to get
but
this right.
by the way, not to make a big deal about it, but Big Yellow Taxi is they don't play it that often. They do play it occasionally.
Mhm.
A lot of quote unquote fans that think they're hardcore don't like this song and the cover. I not only like the song, but I actually like the live version of it. I think it's a fun little song.
Yeah, and it's one of those songs that I think as it became, I think there was a time period where they were playing it kind of all the time,
Oh, right,
and
on the
now it's
radio.
kind of
Yeah,
like half and half, one out of every three. Like
yeah.
it comes up.
If that. Yeah.
Yeah, it comes up in the acoustic section, but it's definitely not every show anymore. And in part that sort of made me appreciate it a little bit more because when you don't hear it a little bit and you hear it again, you're like, actually, this is a really good arrangement of this song. It's actually a really cool version that they do of this song, and they really do play it very, very well.
Did you
I
notice
actually
that?
like the
Yeah.
live version much more so than the recorded version. Always sounded a little flat to me. I don't know.
Yep.
It didn't
Nope.
doesn't pop off the table with me. But I really like live, and especially the way they played over the last few years. I really like it.
Yep. No, I like it better live. Do you ever notice that they always have fun with that song too? That's one of
Yeah.
the songs that they really enjoy playing, and that's why I also like to see it live because I know they're having fun doing it. Okay.
Yeah, and it's one of those songs I think it's like it works for them having fun, right? There's something
Yes.
about that song. I think they talked about this on the last episode about sometimes with Sullivan Street. Sometimes when the song is a little too sad and they're having fun, it's almost a little
Yes.
it's
Yes.
almost a little bit of a weird juxtaposition. But
Yes.
that song, you're like, oh, they're having a good time, I'm having a good time, and we're all having a nice time at the beach. Um, from here they did Round Here, which has there's an outro they've been doing. They still haven't been doing an alt in the middle. I have noticed, by the way, there's a they've done something different. I think this is mostly in the rhythm section. I think this is in Jim and Millard. Um, coming out of the middle part, they're doing something different that's sort of kicking the song up in a different way. It's on the she looks up at the building, she says she's thinking of jumping, that piece. They have found a kind of funkier groove of like pulling that bit upwards. That's really interesting. When you listen to any round here's from this tour, keep an ear out for that because it's actually been. I really like it. I think it's a nice addition to the song and something that I think is new, unless I was missing it in the last year or two. But yeah, they're doing an outro where Adam talks about getting in a car, um, and driving. It's kind of similar to the come outside thing a little bit, but different. Um, I like it. It's kind of a nice it's a nice coda to the song. Um, part of me it makes me want to go do some karaoke and try to drop
Right.
that into the middle because it's kind of there's like it's a little bit. I'm like I could even already having heard it a bunch of times, like listening to shows in the store. I'm like I think I've got this in my ear. I think I could do walk up to the walk up and start doing this on a karaoke stage. From there, they went into the suite, um, which was good. I mean, it's we've talked a little bit about this, right? I'm a big believer that I'd be really into seeing them start to break up the suite so that it's not a 20-minute block that has to, they're either going to play it or not. Because I think all the songs kind of stand on their own. Um, and I kind
Yeah,
of think,
I was almost going to save this to where maybe we talk about the tour in general, but I guess let's bring it up now that I
yeah.
love the suite. I've seen it live. I understand that. In fact, I just heard him talk about it in that other podcast about 24 questions on Bandsplain. I don't know if you caught that,
Oh, I
but
have not listened to that
anyway,
one yet. Yeah.
yeah. So, but he's very proud of this, and someone kind of joked, "Oh, why is he still playing it? Does he want to sell more copy?" One is I think they like playing it. He's just really
Yeah.
proud of it, and he kind of does want to sell it, but not for the money, right? He wants actually people to listen to it because he's so proud of the work. That said, it is what in 2021 is when they had the Butter Sweet Miracle
Yep.
tour or Butter Miracle tour, and then 2022, and now we're I guess in the third year of it. So I do like hearing the songs, but I I I I hope at some point they are comfortable splitting them up because you said they could play just one or two of those and they would stand on their own.
Yeah. Like I think Bobby and the Rat Kings could be an encore song. I think the Tall Grass would be a really cool opener. But something
Yes,
my mind goes to
yes,
the Have You Seen Me part. It goes in. I'd love to see them play that into Have You Seen Me Lately. Would be really cool. And because they used to, I sound like I'm being creative, but they did like slow songs and then had you the rock version of Have You Seen Me Lately? Sorry, second a bunch of times. I think it's probably at different times. I think about I think the 2007 tour they did it a bunch, but they've done it other times. I really like that. And I think the tall grass into that would sound really cool. And I think
yeah,
I just don't want the songs. I think the songs are great, and I think sometimes like relegating them to that.
yeah.
It was actually really
I
interesting
agree.
seeing. Again, we had chairs and stuff, so a lot of people sat down at the beginning of the suite, and a lot of people stood up in the middle of Angel of 14th Street. So there is
Okay.
something about like they're kind of like winning the crowd back midway through
Oh, that's
because the
interesting that they
pace is
stood
kind of
up.
picking up again.
That's interesting that that's the song that they stood up for. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, kind of in because that's when the record kind of the record whatever picks up some steam. And I always like, again, I think there's something really nice. The Bobby and the Rat Kings is obviously a very self aware song, but it is nice to stand with your significant other at the concert in that middle part where uh, uh, she turns to kiss me. Right, you can kiss someone, and you say, uh, "Sometimes memories are all that we've got, so let's go make some at the show." Right, which
Right,
is
right. Yep.
in the literal sense is what you are doing in that moment. I should shout out that was the other thing I love. It's funny with the songs that like get kind of repeated a lot. Like if I'm like listening to a show, I may not always listen to Colorblind, but it's a nice moment to sit next to my wife. We both love that song. We love that together. Like
Yes.
I'm never going to say no to hearing that song in person.
Right.
I'm on that. So,
I'm similar
um,
to you, and I have some other thoughts on the suite that I'll get to when we talk about the Troubadour show. But yeah,
yeah.
great.
And then Rain King and Long December to close it out. Rain King sounded, again, they've been pretty short on that song, but it sounded great, and the energy in it is so great. I miss the longer versions, but at the same time, that song still sounds great, and it's it's always nice if it.
And maybe it allows kind of what Adam said a year or so ago, that maybe not having the longer versions allows him to put one extra song in.
Right. I think that is part of it, right? I mean, literally, I think basically he was saying that evening where he's like, I promised so many songs to people, I've got to chop and cut, and like, I've got too many songs in the set list. And yeah, if Rain King is 5.5 minutes instead of 8, and even like, round here is 6.5 instead of 8, well, together that's a whole other song. So I do see the balance to that. Um,
Yeah, it looked like
Encore.
you
Sorry,
saw one of the. Didn't cut you off, but I saw
sure.
that on the set list on the internet. It doesn't have elevator boots, and I only say that because then it looks like you had a total of 22 songs, which is on the higher right. They average 20, sometimes 21. I've seen as low as 19 generally, but 22, right? You got an extra song in there somewhere. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point because they have been right at like 2019. I think there was one or two that were even a little bit less than that.
Yeah, maybe early on the tour. And to be honest, that's kind of where it's been for I think more than a decade now. I mean, I generally they're a 20 song band live.
Yeah,
So yeah, you got a couple extra songs in there.
and they played. I mean, just from a time perspective, right? They played almost exactly 2 hours. I think a few minutes shy of that, which is a great. I mean, to me, that's a headlining set. There
Yes.
was time periods where they were only playing 80, 90 minutes or an hour 40, and
Right.
they're playing. They came on at 9, and they played really basically up until curfew at 11.
Okay.
So well, and we'll talk about it here. We'll talk this, I guess, as a point generally about the tour. So they've been after. We'll talk about why they've been playing the song in a sec, but they've been playing Time and Time Again a lot at the beginning of the encore. I really love that song. And they've been years since they played it, 7 years, and they didn't play it last night. I think because they were short time. I looked at my watch when they went to the encore, and I was like, dude, there's 18 minutes left, 4 songs. That's not enough. That's not enough time. And it's funny because it's like, as someone who says, I would love to see them change the set list more, it would be really hypocritical of me to complain about them changing the set list in a way. But
But
I would
that's
have been good to see Time and
But
Time
that's the
Again.
song that they brought back on this tour. It's almost the only new song that they did not play last year at all. And you love that song, and you said your wife loves that
She
song,
loves that
right?
song too.
So that
Yeah.
that would have been nice. So we'll see. Maybe I'll get to see Time and Time Again, but not Sullivan Street when I kind of have
I
it.
think you will. Well, and again, I think they seem to be in the mood to play it. But the one thing I was thinking about in the way out was like you're saying, oh, they're playing again on this tour. When they started playing Butterfly in Reverse again, I thought to myself, oh, they're going to play this for a couple months and they'll probably forget about it. And we're 2 years in on them playing Butterfly in Reversed at most shows. So maybe this is a sign Time and Time Again is going to be there for a long time, and I don't
That's
really need
probably
to.
true. It's probably
They're going
true.
to play it time and time again.
Yep.
It is ironic, though, that they had to cut Time and Time Again for.
Right. And for the dashboard. But I guess what you're about to say is that's not a good replacement. Is that they are playing that so long, so long.
I really like that. So yeah, the next song they've been playing it every night almost once they started playing it on this tour. Dashboard Confessional song, So Long, So Long, that features Adam. They've been playing that every night in this tour. I think two things about that. First, I really like that song. Quite frankly, I really like that song, like, kind of leaps and bounds more than other Dashboard Confessional songs I've heard. And again, I've not heard every Dashboard Confessional song, but that is definitely my favorite Dashboard Confessional song that I've heard. So I'm happy to hear them play it. I think it really highlights Adam's skill as not like a backing vocalist, but as a complementary vocalist,
He
you know?
I love both of it. I was thinking about this last night, knowing we were going to record today. I love him as both a complimentary vocalist and a background vocalist.
Mm,
I to this day I don't. I guess just because I'm a Crows fan, but I love his la da da sha na anything sha da da la di da, like, when he does those right, supplemental, plus when he has a voice, sorry, a line on his own.
yeah.
I
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I love him backing. I mean, he's doing backing vocals on like Sixth Avenue Heartache, and I love that song, and I
Yeah,
love
and
what
he's
he
on that
does in that
Ryan
song.
Adams song too.
Yeah, on
What the
Answering
name was
Bell.
it?
Yeah,
Answering Bell. Yeah, I just think, yeah, he knows what to do. He fits his role perfect on
yeah.
these.
Because and funny, he'll like he'll be self deprecating about that because he's like, oh, because he's done like podcasts about like backing vocals on songs. He's like, oh well, it's just me. She's like Sheryl Crow on
Right,
American Girl.
right.
She's a professional, and I'm like, I don't know, dude. You're real good at this.
Yeah, no,
Um,
again, I hate to fanboy it, but I think that's one of his skills, is knowing exactly. Maybe because he has thought a lot about, right, his own vocals as a lead singer, but I think he's great.
Well, the arrangement is really intricate, and I think the original arrangement of the song is a fairly, I think, interesting and intricate arrangement. But one of the things I also know, the second thing I know is like having not seen the video of them playing it yet, they are
Mhm.
having a great time because it's
Yeah,
both whole bands, and so Jim and Millard are up front singing backing vocals because the Dashboard Confessional drummer and bassist are playing drums and bass on the song. So
yes.
that's kind of interesting to see Jim and Millard out front. And Adam is singing. There's a backing vocalist in Dashboard Confessional, and she is singing with Emmy on mic, and then Adam is kind of joining them, and they're kind of like they're doing a lot. There's a lot of like fun energy to the song. And I think the arrangement sounds great. I think it's a really, really good song. It reminds me what he does in that song reminds me. Have you heard the Holiday in Spain
Yeah,
with that
it's exactly what
Dutch
I was
group
gonna
Love,
say.
where
Yep, well, yep,
he takes at the end the other guy, Pascal, is singing the
yes,
main part of the end of the song,
yep.
and he goes off on this thing about like, you know, making the best of all that's left of me, and he goes off this whole
Mm,
other thing, and it's like so good,
it's so
like it's
good. Yep.
amazing, and that's what this song reminds me of, and just the way they kind of I actually think Chris Carrabba is a great vocalist. He has a really
Yes.
nice strong voice, and like anyway, I'm really it's funny. I was talking to someone about that. Like, they're playing that song every night. And I was like, I don't know. Like, they're not going to keep playing that song if they're not on tour with Dashboard Confessional.
Yeah, this is
So
it.
this
This
is
is
your
it.
one or
Yep.
two opportunities to see them play this song together. I actually,
Absolutely.
although I will know, I realized I saw them play this at Town Hall in 2007. I guess not,
Oh,
maybe not long after it was released. Chris Carrabba showed up um, at the show that was recorded for a DVD is actually the DVD is only one part of the show. It's the first part where they play August and everything after straight through. Um, oh no, I'm wrong. I'm just looked at this. Chris Carrabba came out, but they did not play So Long, So Long. I
okay.
don't know why I was thinking. I just pulled up the set list.
But I did see that they had played it before this show. I don't know
They
if it
have
was
played
on
it
a
at
Crow
some
show.
point. Yeah,
Did you get to? I guess this is the time to mention. Did you watch Dashboard in their entire
I
opening
did. We
set?
got there
Okay.
basically right when they started. They were solid. Again, they played for like a almost exactly an hour.
Okay. That's
Um,
normal. Yep.
for fans that want to get prepared, they seem to be playing basically the same set every night,
Right.
give or take like a song. So if you want to be like, I'm going to go listen to the songs that they're going to play, you absolutely can do that and sort of prepare yourself for
And
that.
a lot of their singles, it looks like, plus a
It
couple
seems
of
like,
their, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I thought they were solid. They didn't totally move me. I thought um, I in terms of like Crow's openers, I kind of placed them like kind of in the middle side, like not like below, certainly not among my favorites, and kind of below some of the bands I was surprising. Like I personally I really liked Maroon 5. And I really liked I liked like Matchbox 20. I'd never seen Matchbox 20. I was like, that's kind of
Okay.
cool. I actually got to see Matchbox. I wouldn't have gone to buy a Matchbox 20 ticket. So I placed them kind of below there, and certainly below like my favorites like Augustana and Daniel and the Lion and Field Report and
You know what's
um
interesting about
but
Dashboard?
above live, definitely above
Okay.
live.
Well, that's funny. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have a bit of a soft spot for live, being that about my age, and I kind of saw them when they were first starting once, and I'm also from Pennsylvania originally. But Dashboard, one thing that's kind of cracks me up about them, I guess, is that uh, like Counting Crows are not the definitive '90s band, but when you listen to like August and even Recovering, you get that '90s feeling, I guess, a
Mm-hmm.
little bit, if you know what I mean. The one thing that I think in some ways Dashboard Confessional is such an early 2000 band. Like they're
Yeah.
almost like and I actually like that sound, I guess. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
it feel like you should be watching like a teen film or something, and they would be the soundtrack in the back?
They do have
Of
a very, it's like that sort of the band, especially the full band sound, is
Yeah,
very much that emo sound of the early aughts. Yeah,
emo
it's a
rock.
very
Yeah.
like, it's interesting. It's Adam has talked about on this tour. He's like, man, I've been trying to get this tour to happen for 20
Yes.
years. And he's actually very sweet. He talks about how like on a bunch of shows he didn't talk to this last night, but he's talked about how um their uh uh Dashboard sort of inspired him in the sense that they're another band that is sincere, right?
Yes.
At a time in the early 2000s where bands that were very like aloof and ironic were very popular, Dashboard was a band that was singing about their feelings and doing well at it. So I see that kind of crossover,
Yes.
but it kind of hit me. One of the reasons why you can do this tour now at amphitheaters is in part because Dashboard Confessional songs, sorry, Dashboard Confessional fans are now old enough to be in the same demographic as Counting
Yes.
Crows fans. That they've been a band long enough that you can do the hey, it's 20 because I mean the biggest Dashboard songs are about 20 years old at this point, a little under, I think. But in the same way that again now you can do like I mean Death Cab for Cutie and the Postal Service, which is obviously the same guy, but they're
Right.
doing those two records, the 20th anniversary, and playing like Madison Square Garden because again, the people who were in college when those records came out are now,
Right.
you know, in their 40s.
We talked about Crows being like a coming of age band in the beginning, especially that right, you could have come of age of Counting Crows and you were 19 and a young adult, and then but also with Dashboard Confessional, right, when they were big, maybe you were, I don't know, 29 or 30, you were still a young adult. Maybe you didn't settle down yet, right? And all that kind of stuff. So,
Right.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, and then they finished out with hanging around as one would expect, and then Holiday in Spain. Um which is always a nice way to sort of to close things out. And then Adam sang a little bit of California Dreamin' as he's wont to do.
As he's been doing now for probably 20 years almost,
Yeah,
right?
long time.
I
It's
kind of
nice.
Yeah, I like
I
it.
like it. Yeah.
I think he started that with the Hard Candy Tour, but I could be wrong about that. I think
I
that's
think it's
when
around there. Yeah. There was a period where California Dreamin' was their walk-on music for a little bit. I think
right.
that's the TDL tour where he was using his walk-on music.
I think you're correct about that. Okay, do you have other well, I guess we can talk a little bit about the Banshee tour in general if you don't have any other last thoughts
Yeah.
about
Oh no,
Long
I will
Island.
also say just nice to say hi to all my the Crows fans I've known a long time, like Nicole and Wendy. They were in the first row, so they were right right, but they're
Now,
like, "Oh, hey,
now,
how's it going?"
do you keep now these
Eric.
people that you only see at the crow, like you always see them at the New York crow shows, or do you know them outside of that?
I feel like we mostly see each other at Crows shows, but that we're all, social media friends and say hi in pass, not necessarily we're best friends, but that we say hi in between the tours. But then yeah, it's like when the tour is happening, and that's part of actually it's a nice thing about having like being at a venue where there's seats because sometimes like if you're at like a general admission venue and you don't get there as early as your friends, you don't go say
Right.
hi to your friends unless you're a dickhead and you're going to try to push through. So it's nice to be like, hey, we're sitting near each other and we can say hi and chat for a few minutes between sets and enjoy the show.
Oh, that's great. All right. Yeah, and hopefully they are listening to Sullivan Street, right? And we'll get the word out that way at our with our friends at the shows next to us, or people
Yeah.
sitting and standing next to us at the shows. Okay, so any thoughts about the Banshee tour in general? You with I mean, you mentioned about the set list, and I know there's been a lot of social media talk about whether the band should change up their set list. And I appreciate what you said about, if you're discussing the Crows live nowadays, separating, if you have thoughts about the set list, that's different than how are they sounding. Because I think I said to you off mic before we started this podcast a month ago, I said, when I saw them 3 times in Europe last year, I said, I thought that was the best they sounded live, since I've known them almost.
Hmm.
I think that in some ways they're a polished act with some of these songs. Now, maybe that's one reason that they like playing some of the same songs, because they kind of they know what to do, they know what to get the crowd, and they know what notes to hit, so to speak. I mean, one thing I do want to say, I don't think anybody, given my career background in numbers, this is something I almost had to do and something I did before the tour last year. And you were talking about Butterfly in Reverse, for instance, that they play that all the time. I mean, one thing worth noting is the constraint. So if they're playing 20 songs a night, right now on this tour, they basically have 14 songs that are set. So I don't know if people have realized that. Now they might take away one of these every so often, but in general, they are always playing Mr. Jones, Round Here, Rain King, and Omaha from the first album.
Hmm.
That's 4 songs. They're 100% going to play Long December. That's the
Yep.
only song that he has said on record. I will always play that song unless I tell you otherwise. Then they've been playing Colorblind and Hanging Around basically every time. I think there might have
Hmm.
been one or two they didn't play Colorblind, but in general they've always played that. And they've been ending. So as you said, they've been playing Holiday in Spain,
Hmm.
and Butterfly in Reverse. So now we're up to 9. On this tour, they're going to play. Yeah, and then in this tour, they're going to play So Long, So Long.
Yep.
And then you have the 4 songs from the suite. So I might have done that wrong, but in general, I think that's 14
Yeah.
songs right there.
And time again, like they played that it's not quite every night. They've played that a lot. Miami, they've played a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Um,
I have a list of the alter. I guess the only reason I
yeah.
didn't mention those because even on last year's tour, so I saw them 3 times in Europe.
Hmm.
They played all 14 of those songs as well. So
Right.
it's basically that they're playing 14, and then they have a list of, like, let's just say another 15 that they're
Right.
rotating in 6 out of those 15.
Yeah. They have cut the suite a couple of times. So obviously, well, let's maybe a couple of times. Well, let's get to the elephant in the room, right? So they cut the suite a couple of times over the last week or two. If you look, you'll see a couple of set
I
lists where
noticed that the day before.
they did,
Because
yeah, the day before in
I did
in
not notice that actually, except for when Dan was out, and we'll talk about that. But I didn't actually know until this morning that they had cut it out. Was there any reason for not having it in the day
I think
before?
just
Or?
time. I think
Okay.
it's my impression is just time that if you're gonna play the whole suite, that's about 20 minutes, and if you hit the wrong part in the set and you go, shoot, I will you if you have to cut more than one song, you basically have to cut the suite, right?
Yeah.
That's the easiest thing to cut. So I think that has happened um a
A
couple times. And
couple
we should
times
bring up
on this
the
show.
elephant. We're almost
Yep.
50 minutes in and we
Yep.
haven't mentioned uh Dan got COVID, guys. So
Right. It was really interesting as a Crows fan to see them adapt and that not cancel a show that they're, I guess you would say, lead guitarist. I know you really have to
certainly
call
one
him
of
lead
them, right?
guitarist. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know that he does a lot, but I would call Dan their lead guitarist. That that he was out for, was it 3 shows or something
Three
like that?
shows, 3 shows.
Okay.
So Omaha, and they had kind of a break. I think that's part of why it was only three: Omaha, Indianapolis, and Cincinnati. And so, if you haven't gone back and listened, for those who are listening, maybe you haven't listened to any of those shows. Very interesting shows because not only could they not play the suite because that really involved all the guitarists, but as Adam talked about very specifically, there's a lot of songs that really require 3 guitarists. Right? It's
Yes.
not even a question of someone learning Dan's part. It's no, these songs are now built for three guitarists, and it's really hard to take out that one part and still have what they feel is a complete song. So as a result, the set list leaned very heavily on the first two records. The first record, because Dan wasn't even a member of the band when it was recorded, he joined almost immediately after for touring.
Yep.
And then the second record, because Imi was not a full member of the band at that point. So
Right.
if you go back, most of those songs are still essentially two guitarists on it. And so while Imi can sort of pick up and add things, they can kind of play around a little bit more so than they can with almost any of the other songs, which at that point, once you get to This Desert Life, it's a three guitarist group all the way through. And I thought those shows, so it's interesting. I think the shows, they kind of got better as they went along. I guess that's not surprising because they were hadn't rehearsed like that.
And didn't they hint that I guess it's true that it wasn't like Dan was sick for a couple days, and it was like that they found out right before, right, like a couple hours before the show, and they
The
made it seem
story that
like
Adam told was that Dan was feeling a little bit under the weather. Well, sorry. Adam tells the story where he walks in, and in the dressing room, there's a positive COVID test on the table. And Adam's like,
right.
whose positive COVID test is this? And Dan's like, he's like, who? And finally figures out, Dan's like, oh, I took a test because I was feeling a little under the weather, but it came out negative. And he's like, you might want to check that one again. And it turns out that Dan apparently was, I guess, it just took a lot of time to see that Dan was positive with COVID. Apparently relatively mild, it sounds like.
And we'll just say, by the way, that this was almost exactly 1 week after I met him, which is pretty interesting, for good and bad, and with the and hanging when he was hanging out with his friends. But it's worth saying though, too. Not only did they focus on August and recovering, but they also, of course, did some acoustic Emmy like Blues Run the Game, which was always Adam and Emmy, and
right.
Friend of the Devil, I guess, doesn't require Dan either. So
yeah, they didn't. It wasn't that it was nothing from the later records. There was a couple things they played. If I Could Give Them All My Love on those, they still played Miami. They played
right.
Washington Square. I guess they were able to work around it with those. But I mean, if you haven't listened to any of those shows, there's a full video of the Omaha show up on YouTube. If you
At
don't want
least
to pay
for
for
now,
nugs,
right?
but there's it's interesting. It's really interesting to hear them because you really can kind of hear it's very subtle, but you can hear, especially on, again, a song like Richard Manuel or these other songs where like there's a piece missing. Your ear, it's not so obvious that you're like, wow, you're down a guitar. But you're like, oh, there's a texture that's missing somewhere in here.
I think I noticed it on Recovering the Satellites. Which
Yeah.
is funny because it's from back then, but I get, maybe before Amy was a full band member, but just something, the way they play it live. And I think that song actually really benefits by the third guitar, from the third guitar. Yeah.
And it's become, the way they play it live, it's become such a guitar driven song. It always was, but I feel like now it's really particularly driven by the guitars.
No, that's right.
But I really like I think if you're going to listen to one, I think the Cincinnati show was the best one. Again, not surprising because that was the third one and they had practice playing those songs. The set lists are all either the same or very, very close. So if you're picking, it's not unreasonable to say, I'm going to pick one and just listen to that one all the way through if you're not listening to every show. That is when they started playing Time and Time Again. That kind of got them back into it. Otherwise, all the other songs they played that they had not been playing regularly were still songs that had been in the list last year. Like Anna Begins, they played.
That's right.
They played Recovering and Catapult. So there was it was different, obviously, but
Mrs.
not
Potter's. The only one that I and again, it's not like I've looked at every single set list in the last 3 weeks, but the only, I think, exception is I think I saw High Life on one of them, and that I don't think they've played for a couple years. So I would love to see that live.
High Life, they played. I see the reason why it seems like they pulled that out though is that they were playing the Miller High Life Theater in Milwaukee.
Good call. Okay, so maybe sometimes they do tailor it. Yeah.
According to setlist.fm, they played it twice last year.
Okay.
And twice in 2021. So it's
okay.
It's on the list, but they're definitely at the bottom of the list.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know they played it last year at all. So, all right.
It's hard. It's easy. It's funny. It's with some of those songs where they don't play. if you're not like stalking it, and that's why setlist.fm is wonderful, because it does it does remind you of these things. You're like, oh yeah, they did play it.
The one knock I am going to say about I mean, listen, we can talk about, there's definitely some songs that they should throw in there. I mean, I guess I don't mind saying now, when you talked about splitting the suites, I guess my only two really thoughts is that, yes, there are some, I mean, I love that they brought Butterfly in Reverse back
Hmm.
originally. I thought this is so cool that they're playing this. After 2 years now, I'm like, does it have to be played every show, even if he loves his girlfriend? Part of me thinks you can just rotate it in and out like Anna Begins. I also love Holiday in Spain, but sometimes I think, right, that doesn't have to close. In fact, I was going to mention that at maybe later when we talk
It's
about
been like a
the
decade
Hollywood
now
shows. Yeah,
of that really closing every show.
yeah. So, but the one thing I will say, and that I think the way they're playing their concerts now, they're not playing many of their hard songs.
Hmm.
Now, I think some of those, now, is that also because of the sound? Because they're the audience, I'm not sure. Are those songs a struggle for him to sing? As I said, I saw them play 1492 live last year, and they hadn't played it in like a decade. And he actually mentioned that it was tough for him to sing. Would Angels of the Silences and Have You Seen Me Lately take a lot out of him? And maybe that's why he doesn't do it. I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
you could argue that the hardest song that they play now is Catapult, and that's almost it, right? I mean, is Round Here almost their second hardest song?
Yeah, I mean, you can
Um,
hear it's actually interesting listening to him kind of every night, because I saw some comments somewhere about feeling like Adam wasn't pushing the vocals, and I could kind of hear what they were saying on that show. And then the next night I listened, and it was like, well, he's kind of pushing harder this one. Maybe he just was having a bad night. But
yeah,
I'm with you. I do think I think part of what happened maybe is that we are still, in a sense, coming out of COVID. Um, it's hard to remember that, again, they didn't play for 2+ years, and you got to think they ramped up to start playing in the fall of 2021. And
yeah,
I think, kind of notably, Adam talked about that at the time, of like, it was harder to ramp up than he remembered.
right.
He was like, wow, it was harder than I thought to get back to this. I thought some of these songs were in my bones, and they weren't there. So I think that's part of it, maybe, is that they're still kind of adding stuff back a little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe they pick some of the easier songs as they were coming back, and they just kind of haven't gone back. I would like to see them revisit Recovering the Satellites. They've talked a little bit about maybe doing like an expanded edition of that record, which maybe that
Okay.
would, because I really love a lot of those songs. I also think, I was thinking about this, that a lot of, and we can talk way more about this on like an episode about the show. All those songs are about disconnection and feeling disoriented, which,
Yeah.
man, I mean, don't we all feel that way after the last 3 years? Like,
Right.
don't, I was thinking about like Have You Seen Me Lately? And I was like, man, have we all seen each other lately?
Yeah. Or
Kind of,
even
yeah. I was like,
or even Dislocation from Somewhere Under Wonderland.
yeah,
So I guess I'm thinking that those, and that, right, that none of that, most of Somewhere Under Wonderland is kind of harder guitar driven rock, and certainly the first half of the Saturday Nights portion, right, like Insignificant or Hanging Tree. I guess there's part of me, I know they're probably tough to sing, but there's this part of me that thinks, "Ooh," and as you said, Recovering the Satellites, I'd like to see maybe one or two more quote unquote
yeah.
harder songs. But besides that, I'm actually fairly happy with their set list. And you have to think, for what percent of that audience
That's
either
part of
doesn't
it, right?
doesn't know Crows that well, only knows them, or bought just their major albums, and they do want to play Mr. Jones around here. And I guess the logic is too, if you that Adam's thinking, hey, if I play five of my seven most popular hits, right, that then I can put the suite in.
That
That's
might, I
that's
think
the
that
trade off.
that's a fair point. That may be part of it too. Is if I'm putting the suite in, I should also give them Mr. Jones, right? If I'm playing 20 minutes straight of new material, I'm going to make sure to give them the other hits.
Right, because even
Um,
people that have all of their LPs might not have bought the suite, for instance.
right.
So yeah,
And I also think there's a little bit of like, again, I think about the coming out of COVID mindset of like, look, these people were brave, like in 2021, still braving it a little bit, right? Coming out to a concert. I don't want to disappoint anyone by not playing Mr. Jones, right?
Right.
Like, I don't want anyone to be like, I wore a mask and I dealt with all these difficult things and I didn't. I came to a show and I didn't hear Mr. Jones and that sucks. So it's like, no, let's give that to them.
Yep. Yep.
Although speaking of braving it and being in like smaller clubs, although one thing I want to say before we get to
Yeah.
before I want to get to yours, I do kind of wish they'd done a couple more Adam and Emmy songs when they had the opportunity. I always kind of like the two of them as a duo.
Oh, you like?
I know they
Okay.
Blues won the game. It would have been nice if they could have done one or two more. They could
Okay.
have pulled out a couple of interesting little things there. Missed opportunity in my
Oh,
mind in
do
that
you
regard.
mean when Dan was out?
When Dan was out, I think
Yeah.
it would have been cool to be like, hey, we're gonna play like a duo version of any really name a song. We're gonna play it like a duo version of Round Here or something or whatever. Just because they've done shows like that. Or they've done with the suite, right? They did like elevator boots, I think, just the two of them. Like,
Yes.
we're gonna play elevator boots, just the two of us tonight.
Oh, okay.
That would have
Yeah.
been cool. Anyway,
And as much as I love Dan, I mean, he's so vital to the Counting Crows. I had this big smile on my face when Bryson was getting a lot of focus on those couple shows, and just even them joking about it, right? Like they're on one show, Adam was like teasing that even before Dan was sick, Bryson was writing me, and I love that they call him Bryson. It just cracks me up. Bryson was writing me and saying, "Play more August songs," and he's like, "That's because Bryson. That's
here's
because
a list of
Bryson."
songs we can
Right.
play.
And he's like, "That's because Bryson just wants to lead and solo more songs." There's not. It just cracked me up, and I was enjoying seeing him as a change of pace on the. Can I know we have to move on, but that's fine just because it's so unique to talk about. But it got me thinking, and
Mhm.
Dan is so vital to their sound, and I would
Mm.
argue he is their true lead guitar player, even though Emmy does a lot of solos and maybe writes more music now and all that kind of stuff. But it did get me thinking, like, who's not replay, but that, for example, I like Charlie a lot. If Charlie was sick, could they actually still, like, could they actually play? What band
That would be
members
a
could
hard one.
they? That's You're right, and people won't think of it. They're like, oh, you can just play guitars and drums and bass, but not really. Charlie's so vital to so many songs. Of course,
Yeah,
you need the drums unless you're going to have an entire acoustic show.
but that's the thing. I think without the drums, you could go all acoustic
Yeah,
with Charlie on piano. And because they've done like some when they
they've
did
done,
some of
yeah,
the secret shows for the Outlaw Road show, the
yes,
lineup was Adam, Emmy, Dan, and Charlie. That's they have sets that are that four piece.
okay,
So if you were missing Millard or Jim, and you were like, we've got to basically go kind of full acoustic,
right,
they've again they don't use that all the time, but they've got enough in their pocket that they could be like, we could work up a full show like that.
yeah.
They know. You're right. I think Charlie is
I think he's
weirdly
the
the hardest
MVP.
one.
I think he's the MVP, except for Adam, of course. You need Adam singing, unless they're going to play an instrumental
Yeah.
concert.
The
But
guitars, well, and the thing about the guitarists, right? It's not that they're not great. It's just that there's three of them.
yes, exactly. And right, you have three, so you could survive with two guitars, right? A lot of bands have one or two. So, okay, do you want to, just because you know a lot about it, I think this is a perfect time before we get into our Hollywood shows. Do you want to mention about Nugs and this? Because
Oh,
you
we
said you
should.
subscribe.
Yes.
Yeah,
I must
please.
have so nugs.net is it's a live music well, it's a live music website, right? You can purchase shows on there, but they also have a streaming service. And uh in 2021, the Crows have sold MP3s of shows through there for a very, very long time, on and off. They did it in 2008. They've done it. They did some archive stuff with them, and then they did it 2014 through 18. And they did it again in 2021, but Nugs now has a subscription service that the Crows are on. So if you pay, I think it's $10 a month for Nugs. I think I'm still on a promo thing from a while ago that I when the Crows went on and were like becoming part of the streaming service. I think I paid X for a year, and they've kept rolling that over. But you can listen to this tour. Um, 2021, they skipped last year. Now this tour, you can listen to every night on Nugs, and it's generally the shows go up the day after, which is actually better. In the past, they've been a little bit inconsistent about when the shows go up. They've been pretty consistent about getting them up the day after on this tour. So if you want to follow along on the tour, you can. The sound quality is really, really good. They're mixing. They've been doing a little better job. If you go back to like the 2008 versions, you'll hear how like kind of dead silent it is when like Adam goes to offer the crowd the singing in Omaha, and they've done a better job with mixing now, where you can at least
Oh,
kind
okay.
of hear hear that there's some crowd there. But they're all soundboards. They all sound clean. I like now, especially again, I talked about like I like on my way to work, I'll put on the show and I'll notice what did they play last night? Where does it seem
Mm,
like there was some banter, and listen to what Adam's been talking about that night? And hey, they played "Come Around" last night. I love that song.
I love that.
Um,
I do love that song.
they've played that a few times,
I
and it's
saw that.
always
Yep.
that one's always a pop. I was hoping they'd play that last night, but they played that on the other night.
Okay.
Um, I love that. I'll just say briefly, I love that song. Always makes me think of an ex. That the end part about uh you've seen what she says all the things, one of the million lies she said is all the things you love are dead, but I've seen what she thinks is love and it leaves me laughing. That is a very, very good line.
Oh, that's true.
Very, very good line, and always makes
Mm.
me think of someone. Um uh yeah, but I recommend, and Nugs is great. Again, if you love other live music, there's a lot of other acts on there too. If you're a Bruce Springsteen fan or a Grateful Dead and Dead and Co fan, if you like Fish, if you like there's a lot of different people on there. The Allman Brothers. You could go. There's a lot of different, like significant amounts of live music on there.
Right.
If
It's not
that's your
just you
thing,
pay your subscription just for crows. You're
right?
getting
But you could also. That's the other thing. It used to be it's like $10 a show for MP3s. If you're like, look, I want to maybe just buy the one show, but I want to listen. You could subscribe during the Crows tour,
yep.
knock out all these shows as you're going along, and then unsubscribe until the next tour. That was also an option. So,
Yeah, I
um,
did buy, as you said, I actually saw them in 2008 and I did
mm.
buy that show. I'm not sure I still have it. But
But
yeah,
now it's there on Nugs.
yeah,
It's
that's
streaming right
right.
there.
All right, great.
Yep.
Any
So highly
last
recommending that.
Great. I guess that wraps. All right. So that wraps up our talk about Chris's review of the Long Island show on the Banshee Tour and the Banshee Tour thoughts in general. And we will get into the Hollywood portion of this podcast
Yeah.
right
We've
after.
teased it. I feel
Yeah,
like
I was
we've
going to say.
right after what?
I was going to say right after this little break. I was going to say I might cut that out, but hold on. So, time to get to the Hollywood show, the Banshee kickoff show, if you were. As most of you, I assume, know by now, that Sirius XM sponsored a kickoff show, I guess, of the tour. About a week, well, we said about a week before the
Mm-hmm.
tour. It seemed to have been thrown together fairly quickly because they announced it suddenly. You got that impression too, right?
Yeah, certainly there wasn't much notice, and there's not always notice for things like this. But yeah, it did seem like there was not. It either was thrown together quickly or they had it very heavily under wraps.
Yeah, that
So
I got the feeling that the management, Crow's management, just talked to them and somehow got together. Oh, this would help everybody. It would give SiriusXM some content. That they would have this 90-minute, I guess it was in the end, concert that they can play exclusively and get people excited, and then right, it would get people maybe sell some tickets, right? That was the idea too, that
right,
that people would
promote the
listen to it
tour.
on Sirius XM and promote the tour. So they made a big deal that it was in the Troubadour.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just a little bit of background. I don't know a lot about live venues. I am not originally from LA. Like I said before, I'm from the East Coast. I also from Philadelphia. Also lived in New York City a bit, and near DC. I have some connections and family connections. So the Troubadour is a famous venue. I know they talked about how Elton John, I guess it was, played there or something, and a few other famous acts. So I got well, and it's pretty small. It fits about 500 people, and then you can imagine that people connected to SiriusXM and other friends of the band, etc. Well, they're going to get tickets.
Right.
So then, how many were available to the public? My guess is maybe 200 at most. That's kind of was maybe 250, but at least half was probably to corporate connections and band connections. So when I heard about this, I saw that. I said, oh, the tickets are going to be available. I went online to try to get them. And by the way, like you were talking about pre-sales, when I was trying to get pre-sale tickets before to the LA shows, it was no problem whatsoever. I mean, I'm sure there's
Right.
some scalpers that are buying things, but I was getting good seats fairly easily. The Troubadour had a weird website, and the one thing that's totally not clear to me is, did I click to purchase tickets before like they went to release, or a second after? Because I guess if you went before, it would put you into some queue, or at
Mm.
least, and then but then someone told me they would randomize the queue, so I wasn't sure if I got into the queue properly or not. But what I do know is that it sold out in 6 minutes. I think, gosh, I might have told you, I think that maybe only 140 or 50 tickets. Well, that was, but you could buy up to two tickets.
Right.
So, right, maybe there was only like 150 for sale or something like that, or 150 spots times two. Yeah, and I was like number, 350. So I wasn't even close. And I was kind of surprised. I was like, geez, I didn't know there was, 500 diehard Crows fans that are going to buy tickets within 10 minutes. Like, although I guess it could have been, but it couldn't be scalpers either, really, the way it was worked. You had to bring your ID
Mm.
if you were purchasing it. Or if a
Yeah.
scalper went, they would have to be your date to the show.
That's a pretty different dating show.
Yeah.
But
So
no, it's interesting because it's part of one we forget, right? Is like, um, at this band's like lowest sort of point, they've been most of them playing like several thousand seat theaters,
yes.
over their career, right? So they've played some small shows here and there, but a 500 seat venue it's a hot ticket. It's a hot ticket for this band, even at this stage, which is
Yeah.
also, it's good to make sure that they are still that, but it still makes sense. That's probably the smallest venue. That's smaller than any venue I've seen the whole band in probably a solid 15 years, unless
Oh,
I'm
I,
forgetting
I
something.
can't imagine them. Yeah, as you said, even in there. I mean, I guess some of those shows that they played when they were doing Shim Sham, I don't know the capacity of those.
Those are
Um,
smaller, and the Outlaw Roadshow, like secret shows, were smaller, but like the whole band, even because it's promotional stuff. And so the last time I saw anything close to that small was probably Irving Plaza for Somewhere Under Wonderland. But Irving Plaza is still like 1,000 or so people. I think it's got to go back to when they were promoting Saturday nights and Sunday mornings. I saw them in like
oh,
a
right.
full venue, a full band playing at a venue that's that small.
Yeah, no, I think you're, yeah, right. That makes sense. It was funny. So I don't know when we started this podcast, like 5 6 weeks ago, and then shortly after that, I saw this, and I was like, well, this is a sign. I live near LA. I can, I don't
The
know.
world is telling you need to
Right.
go to this concert.
I'm full into that, but then I couldn't get tickets. So I was like, ah, geez. So then someone posted on Reddit that day that they had tickets available, or one extra ticket. And it's funny because I'm very skeptical. I don't want to be scammed. I had a little back and forth with the gentleman. His name is Patrick. It ends up that he was not even a diehard Crows fan. He just heard about it or got alert. He's actually a really big live music fan and
Mhm.
loves that venue, and
Oh,
gets
okay.
notices about certain kind of concerts, and something came on, and he suddenly got it and was lucky in the queue, and he bought a ticket for him and his wife. And he said his wife is not a particular Crows fan, but also doesn't necessarily like general admission
There you go.
things, because right, you don't know where to sit or whatever. And it was a weekday, and she's like, I can't be bothered. But yeah, I just got a good vibe. And it's interesting because I met Patrick, and thank you so much, Patrick, for selling me the ticket and not trying to overcharge me for it. And yeah, a shame I didn't see him after. And as I said, I had to, yeah, when I went in, I kind of lost them, and then didn't, because I wanted to buy him a drink to thank him. I also wanted to know,
Hopefully he'll be at one of the shows in the fall that you go to,
yeah, he
maybe.
gave me some good suggestions, which I don't have here, about some other bands to listen to. He's like, oh, it seems like you listen to a lot of the same stuff. I have some more modern things for you to listen to. And he actually gave some pretty good suggestions to me. I forgot to reach out. I did it last night. I didn't hear from him. I wanted to hear what he thought about the show
Hmm.
as a casual fan. So yes, I went to the show there, and it, yeah, it did feel semi-private, as I said. I did get this feeling that a lot of the people there were connected to Sirius or the bands, and there was even a couple celebrities. The other thing I was thinking, I had just talked to him before this, was that Counting Crows fan Graham, who hosts the Crawling Around My Brain podcast, I had just talked to him about a week before, just on a Zoom, about the Counting Crows, and I remember thinking, I wonder if he's going to be. Oh no, I think he told me he was going to be at the show, and I said, oh, I wonder if I'll see him. And I looked to the right of me and I said, I think that's him. I only met him via Zoom before. So it was kind of good to talk about that. And as whether you believe in fate or whatever, it was neat. And we could kind of bond about that. The one good thing about running into him was he mentioned to me that he was at this famous Italian restaurant next door. I guess they call it a red tablecloth, or the red tablecloth Italian place. And he goes, oh, it's kind of home style, but a lot of celebrities go and it's hard to get. And then he mentioned to me, he's like, oh, there was at least 2 or 3 celebrities there, including Cindy Crawford. I said, whoa, that's cool. And Bill Simmons, who I guess is the number one sports podcaster now by salary. He goes, oh yeah, and I listen to him. He's actually a big Counting Crows fan. And he goes, oh, I'm sure they're here because that's probably why they were there. And he actually pointed them out to me, which I'll just say now, because this is one of my favorite parts of the story, is that because I wouldn't have known, right? It's weird because of this kind of pseudo VIP thing. Not only was it kind of open because it was such a small show, but I guess they actually gave me, and this comes up later, they actually gave me like a pass that said like VIP, not just a lanyard. I have that too.
Right.
But they also, because that was like promotional, like, oh, everybody gets this lanyard. But I also got another thing on my hand that said like VIP. And Graham even said something to me. He goes, well, it seems like they're just giving this to everybody. Well, I found out later they didn't, and I'm not sure why I got one. If I might have followed somebody who was a VIP,
maybe they're fans of the show.
They're fans of Sullivan Street. But yeah, so I could have went up there. But one interesting thing is, we pointed out, he goes, oh, but in case you're curious, that's where Cindy Crawford is. And I looked at her in the back. I said, oh wow, that is Cindy Crawford. She was the number one supermodel when I went to college, same time as when the Counting Crows were big. So, and I always thought she was, a great supermodel. But the best part about Cindy Crawford being there, and this came up a little later, is that Adam must have known. Now, whether they talk later or before, or because I don't think you would notice her from the stage, even though it wasn't that far away. But during the line of Mr. Jones, she's perfect for you. There's got to be somebody for me. He points at Cindy Crawford, which nobody got that unless you knew that she was there, and you wouldn't have known that she was there. But
just an inside joke.
Yes, but when he did it, he was hugging and winking at Dan. Like, hey, like basically, because Dan, right? He's just like hugging Dan, and hey, she's perfect for you, Dan. Cindy Crawford's perfect for you. As I'll mention later, I actually got to talk to Dan a little bit, and he was very happy I told him that story, because he remembered kind of Adam going out of his way to sing that line and kind of hug him while doing it, but he did not know that Cindy Crawford was in the audience.
It was just for
yeah, so I do.
It was Dan just for Adam. It was just for Adam.
It was just for Adam, or maybe he would have mentioned it to Dan later. But Dan told me he did not know at the time. So that was pretty cool, and it was fun, kind of funny to see Cindy. I hadn't looked at her that much, but a couple times it looks like she got into. I mean, she knew the singles. I don't think she was a hardcore fan, but it was kind of neat to see her get into like Rain King, and I'm not sure about hanging around. I forgot if she was still there.
So how close were you? Were you pretty close? Because it was a small room, so you probably weren't fighting for the front. But
I'm telling you, it felt even smaller than 500, and maybe 100 could fit at the top. It just felt like it was like a 300. So I think I saw me on one of the video. I was in front of Dan. I usually am on the Bryson side. This time I was on the Dan side, and I want to say I was like third or fourth row. But the interesting thing is that. So I think I told you in the Ireland show, I was probably the closest ever. I think I was officially second row, but I was right in the front. Like I was second row, right in front of Adam. I could have had first row if I moved over a bit, general admission. But the interesting thing about this Troubadour show, there's no gap between the audience and the stage.
Right. It's like stage. It's right. a club venue, right? Like you're basically
Yeah.
pressed up against the stage.
So I guess if I was officially third row or fourth row in front of Dan, it still felt that, even though he wasn't that close, that like Adam, that almost I could touch Adam, even though that's not
But you
true.
were
I
physically closer than, again, if
Yes.
something like Jones Beach last night, right? Like there's a gap between the stage. So I was
Yeah.
second row, but yeah, I could have theoretically been, and there was actually kind of a gap between the first row and even the rail. So I was pretty close, but if I've been close at a general admission venue before, it's been a bit,
Yep.
but that's much closer to them. That's much more like
Yeah,
viscerally
I felt that I
tight,
could touch his guitar. I'm not sure that I actually could or thought of it. You know what I mean? But I'm just saying it felt that way of Dan's guitar, that I was that close to him, and you could see, whatever. I mean, I guess I could see it in Ireland, but you almost felt, I don't know, the sweat from Adam's forehead was
Right? Yeah.
magnified as he was running around. So that was, I had. We can talk about the set list in a bit. um it's funny you mentioned about the Adam moment. There was it's funny. I want to make you want to kind of make eye contact a couple times when you're that close, just to say like, I definitely know Adam Duret saw me. Like it wasn't just he looked in my direction. We made eye
Yeah.
contact, and I want to say I made eye contact with him 10 times. And when I did, even though when I'm really in the zone, and was so happy because it was such a unique and special show, rare show, I almost feel after if I make eye contact with a second or two, I almost look away because I feel like guilty a little bit that I'm getting too much Adam attention. Yeah, I know it's not about me, but you know what I mean? Like I'm almost like, no, I don't want to make him feel like I'm staring at him or something like that. So a couple
Yeah.
seconds is cool, and then I almost but I feel the same way about even mouthing the lyrics sometimes when you're that close, because I know on a couple of those shows, like when the suite came out, that I knew almost like so much about the suite compared to the
Mm.
people around me, and where you kind of want to enjoy him singing it, but then you kind of want to sing along. And part of me wants to show him that, yes, people do know the suite and love it, but then you don't want to come across as some, wild, stalker either.
I mean,
So
he knows the
it's
words too, so I
yeah.
think he's okay with you knowing the words. No, and I always try to sing. I'm very conscious of this because I have kind of a loud voice. I try to be very careful about like mouthing words,
Yeah.
unless he's basically demand. Like if we're all screaming "yeah" in Mr. Jones, I will sing that full voice, But I will try to be very.
Yeah, a
um
lot of times I end up mouthing them without actually saying them. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
so yeah, sometimes it's that quiet. Yeah,
That's what I'm doing, or I'm just not even putting. And so we can see. So I almost want to
yeah.
show like, this song and I love this part, but I want to hear you sing it, not me.
Right, that's part of it too, right? Is you do want to let. I mean, if you love if you love Counting Crows, you probably love hearing what Adam Duritz does to songs, and so yeah, you want to expect like, yeah, I'm curious how he's going to sing this tonight.
But there is one part near which cracked me up. That there were definitely a couple times he looked at me in some lyrics, and there were some lyrics that hit a little more. I'll talk about what song I thought was excellent, but the one that cracks me up is he definitely stared at me the entire time, and it was just me when he said, "We spend all day getting sober." On the hanging around, like watching, hiding from daylight, watching TV, and
All right, how many drinks did you have, Eric?
it's funny because no, I basically do not drink anymore, and I did not drink during that show. But certainly, I spent a lot of time in my 20s, early 30s being hungover. Unfortunately, I tend to get bad hangovers compared to my friends, even if I don't drink too much. So I was like, okay, I'm seen. He recognizes this. He recognizes how many days I lost.
He somehow understands me.
Yeah, exactly. But it was funny because it wasn't just for a second. That was the whole line. I was like almost embarrassed. I was like, how does he know that? So okay. So did I just wanted to make sure. I okay. Well, I'll talk about talking to a couple band members, but let's get into, because you did get to hear the
That's
songs.
the
There was
beauty of it.
15 songs, which was five, as we said, 5 songs shorter than usual. I think that was clearly, I don't think that was, and I know Adam said he was recovering from COVID. It kind of hinted that it was thrown together pretty quickly. We could question the set list, but I think the 15 songs were clearly, that was an agreement ahead of time. Like it
The
was a
length.
perfect, yeah.
Yeah, they basically played about 90 minutes, and it's interesting. The Sirius, for whatever reason, the Sirius like listing showed an hour. and then they blew past that, and I was like, because I thought they were going to cut the show down
Yeah.
initially when I started listening to it, because I knew it was longer than an hour. But yeah, they clearly were. Yeah, it's a shorter show. What they also very clearly did was cut out acoustic songs. I guess on the assumption of it's a club and it's chatty. You never know, and it's you probably want to plow ahead and play kind of a louder set.
Yep.
So
And
a little bit more like the way they play maybe a festival.
yeah, and he said that's why there's going to be no encore. Did they keep the banter in the? I wanted to ask you.
They cut if there was any banter, there was one line of before Butterfly in Reverse, and that was about it. So
Okay.
if there was banter, that may have been one thing they did cut out.
Okay, and there wasn't a lot of it, but they did say, oh, one thing we didn't talk about, which was so interesting, we talked about the venue, is that, let's see if I get this correct, that Dan's guitar stopped working during Goodnight Elizabeth,
Oh,
which was the first song, right?
yep, that's all
So
good.
the instrumental part, oh no, sorry, Emmy's, it was Emmy's guitar. Emmy's guitar went out during Goodnight Elizabeth. So if I remember correctly, they extended Dan's part, or if I remember correctly, it's a little longer version than
Hmm,
it should have been because they were hoping to get Emmy's guitar back
working.
working. And it was the first song, and you could almost see them like annoyed, and then almost kind of laughing about it. And then, but it didn't get fixed right away. It took a couple minutes. They couldn't figure out what was going on. At least it felt like a couple minutes, like 2 or 3, or maybe even longer. So yeah,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, right? They brought right at the end of that song, and his guitar started working again. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I will say I love that song as an opener. I like it's a thing that only this band would do, or very few other bands certainly would do. That we're going to play a concert that's going to be broadcast on a radio station, and we are going to open with a slow song that we play for 11 minutes or so. That
Yep.
includes a
Yep.
includes a Velvet Underground song in the middle. I just love the again, even when they play that song a lot, but it was still like, I love that. I think it's so cool as an opener and the way it kind of sets a tone. And just to be like, yeah, we're doing a radio show, but we're opening with an 11-minute song. It's it's still them,
Yeah. So, yeah. If it was about 11 minutes, right? So, if it was, my guess is that it would have been a 7-minute song, and then it got extended 4 minutes
Oh
because
no, they
because
usually
of the
they might have been
dance.
12, might have been 13 or 14 then,
Yeah.
if that's the case, because it's if you look at the times on Nugs, you can, as you know, it generally clocks in 10, 11 minutes at this point.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. If I could, do I have any comments about the actual performance and set list? I'll just mention a couple. I guess as someone who saw them a couple times in 2022, not too much stood out. Except I do want to say I thought, I don't know how it came across in when you heard it, but at least being there, I thought clearly the best performance was Recovering the Satellites. So not only do I love that song, but they were just into it. Something about it just seemed,
Hmm.
the energy of that song was, and it's interesting because again, that's obviously not a single or
Right.
anything, but the way they played it. Anyway, and even Graham, now I know he likes that album, but he felt the same thing I did during that song. One, he didn't feel as much, I know he doesn't really love the Sweet. Now, one interesting, I guess I want to say, I thought Bobby and the Rat Kings was great. Now, you said something about that they could end the song. I wish that
I could put that.
Bobby,
I could have that. I could see that in an encore. Maybe I wouldn't end
yes,
with it, but
and it is such. I mean, this is one of my soapboxes, but Bobby and the Rat Kings is such a great live song if you let it be a great live song to you, because it's kind of fun. It has the interesting the dun, 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 and then I mean, don't forget, for hardcore Crows fans, if that's whether that's your favorite song or not, it's about being like obsessed with a band,
yeah.
and that they'll make you, and you can escape all your troubles even though it's not going to escape your troubles for a couple hours,
Hmm.
and it's a fun. And I'll bring this up some other time, but I we did it a little bit in the UK show. There were some fans around me that really were into them, but when it goes like da, 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 and if the whole audience knew like to clap at the right thing, you can clap at the da, da, da,
That yeah.
and a bunch of us did it at some of the shows, and it brings even more energy to it. It's really a lot of fun. I wish we could start
I
something
feel
with
like
the
the UK
clapping.
crowds are going to be better at that. Every time I
Yeah.
listen to boot, it's like the Irish crowd, like in Ireland,
Yep.
they're going to get that clapping just right.
Yeah, they did, and it
Of
even
course they did.
added more to the show. Um,
The
you
one thing I
know,
wanted to ask you,
yeah.
just in looking down at the set list here, um, what was the crowd like for Colorblind? Because when I've been in general admission venues the last couple of years, the talking during Colorblind is brutal. And I was curious if in a room like this, if that carried over. Um,
Luckily, no. But I think you're right. I think it's just that this particular audience kind of knew it was a VIP show, and they were
yeah,
pretty. There wasn't a lot of nonsense going on, and I don't think there were like casual fans, right? You either had to be
right,
connected to Sirius and you kind of thought it was special, or you were in that 150 or 200 that bought tickets online in the
right.
first 5 minutes.
You
So
didn't have the drunk guy on a Friday night. Although sometimes
no,
industry shows, sometimes you do get that thing of like there
yes,
are a bunch
yes,
of people who are
yes,
not
not fans, and
fans
they
and they're here because their boss told them to go or whatever. But I'm guessing again, maybe in a really small place like that, people were heads up enough to go like, I
no.
should shut up right now.
Yeah, no,
This is too
I think
quiet.
you're right. At least it didn't strike me. The only other thing I do want to mention, because this will come up when I talk about missed opportunities, that Long December was a bit of a treat, partly because he mentions Hollywood
Mhm.
a couple times. I'm actually a sucker for playing the song of the that closely, or at least mentions, right. Crow's songs love to mention place, and when they mention the place, like I said, like watching a DC show and they mention the Chesapeake Bay, I love that.
Mhm.
The crowd loved that he mentioned Hollywood a few times in Long December. Did you
Yeah.
notice anything else about I remember you said that you thought the performance came across pretty well, but I
Yeah,
don't
that sounded
know.
great. It got me excited for the tour. I was like, oh, I'm ready. I'm ready to go see them now. I'm feeling uh they sounded good. I thought, Adam was talking about his voice because he'd been sick a little bit apparently, and
Yes, yes, he
I
said it
thought he
was a
sounded good.
non-COVID illness. Oh yeah, Miami was also good. Yeah, I had also marked that hanging around in Miami were also pretty good, but
Yeah.
nothing more. I mean, Miami, of course, is a good crescendo. I mean, that used to be one of my favorite songs to see live. I guess I've seen it so much now that I'm not as excited about it. But
Yeah.
clearly, it's a good concert song, even for casual fans. I think Miami is also a song that even people that don't know Miami like it to hear it live.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of there's a great dynamic to it as a live. There's a reason why they play it a lot. It is a real dynamic to it. I was actually thinking I have a note in here. I was apparently thinking about this while I was listening to that show. Miami and Sullivan Street are kind of similar sentiments.
Oh,
They're kind of songs about knowing, like, a sense of foreboding in a relationship, like being within a relationship and knowing it will end. It's kind
oh,
of what Miami's about. It's pretty
yeah.
much what Sullivan Street's about. I had never made that connection before, and I just had this note a note here while I was listening to that. But
So
yeah, I
I
think a good show. And again, I think they were probably a little restricted on, hey, we're playing this for the radio. Um, you know,
yeah, I guess the only thing I want to say, but again, you said if they're only going to play 15 songs, it restricts the set list even more. And if he really was, it did look, by the way, that he was recovering from an illness. It just
mm,
came across that way, even though he sang well. If you just looked at him, not that he looked bad, but he looks like someone who had recovered from a few days ago, right? Someone, as
yeah,
you said, about 60 years old. So I did believe that. So maybe they didn't get to prepare too much. They probably wouldn't have done. Maybe I think you even said they probably wouldn't have done additional preparation anyway. But because it was such
yeah.
a special venue and maybe people wanted something more for heart, it certainly was not a set list that like this was the most amazing private Shim Sham show, and they did stuff that they never did, and it was so no, it was kind of this, I guess, maybe in some ways generic, typical of what they've been playing, but just to kick off the tour. And I'm fine with that. I do think though that especially because he used to live in LA, and he mentioned that a couple times, and he used to
Mm.
live in Hollywood, right? There should have been, it would have been cool if you put just one bonus song in there for the show. And I think I wrote you and said, like, he could have. done Good Night LA. He could have done Elvis Went to Hollywood.
Los
He
Angeles.
could have done Los Angeles. And what I forgot about until yesterday, there's also a which I wouldn't expect him to sing this, but there was one of the unreleased tracks from Saturday Night Sunday Mornings, or bonus tracks,
Sunday
was
Morning
called
LA.
Sunday Morning LA. So if he
Yeah.
had played one of those,
That would have been a big. That would have been a real deep cut.
yeah,
I'm not sure they've ever played that song.
no, but you know what I
Or
mean. Just
even I was
adding,
thinking about like in I Wish I Was a Girl. I'm going down to
oh yes,
Hollywood,
yes,
right?
yes,
I'm going
yes,
down to
yes,
Hollywood. They're going to make a movie. That could have been. You could have done that. Yeah, I'm with you. There was maybe more opportunity to
yeah.
have kind of a little bit more of a
But
like
I'm not
Hollywood
greedy.
moment.
I'm not greedy. I would have just wanted one of those, for the hardcore
I
fans,
want
right? To
all
play.
of them. I'm going to write this set list tonight.
I was ready for Elvis Went to Hollywood. So yeah, so that was my only other thoughts are about that. I talked to a few band members. Do you have any other thoughts about the show or any questions? I guess no, right?
No, I guess I'm curious. So because I can't. I've never been in the Troubadour. I've been in lots of small venues, but I've never been there. I'm trying to imagine. So you're close to the stage,
Yes.
right? And then you said you end up sort of in kind of like a VIP
Oh
area.
yeah, well
How
that's
does
the
that
okay,
work?
right. So you
Like
walk
paint
into
me a picture. You know?
yeah, so you walk in the little which I guess I missed it. Okay, so you walk in the front door and immediately on the left there's a bar. But that is almost like segregated from if you're in that bar, I don't think I don't think there's a window there. If you're in that bar, you wouldn't be watching the show. Like that's
Hmm.
almost just like the Troubadour bar. And maybe that's even open when they're not, so I don't know. So then you walk into a little hallway and you go open up and then the stage is in front sorry, and then uh, the stage would be on the right hand side then. So as soon as you enter, the stage is on the right, so you kind of have to go to the left of it. Right. So if you just parked yourself, if you just got into this right in there and you stood right there, you'd be to the right of Bryson.
Okay.
If you just walked straight and stopped. So yeah, and then I don't know how far deep it goes back. Maybe only 8 people deep, and then only is enough to like cover the stage almost. There's not, and the stage is very condensed. That's the other thing. Yeah, you can almost see it pretty crowded up there with all of Charlie's setups and the drum, and they have a pretty large band, right? So that was kind of set up.
Well, that's I will say another set list restrictor for them. I feel like I've seen them talk about this somewhere. It's a similar, weirdly, a similar problem with festivals, although kind of a different thing. But
Right.
when you lack space or they're troubled on what they can bring in, they use so many different guitars
Yes. Yes.
that if you're like, look, we're only going to bring 3 guitars in because it would be insane to bring the whole thing for like when we don't have the space. That's also going to be a set list restrictor for them because
Yep.
it means there's songs they just have to cross out because we don't have space for one more guitar to add. So
No,
that's
that
going to kind of cut them, cut out the
yeah.
list a little bit.
No, that's right. And if you watch any of the videos of it, there is some online. Again, I could be wrong about this, but to me, it felt like it only went like 8 to 10 people deep. Like it was not that, and then I don't know how many wide. And then right behind that, there is a second bar,
Okay.
which is actually a pretty big bar. And that's the bar that there's, I think you can walk around the whole bar if I remember correctly. So it's a second bar. Then, but also when you originally walk in, you're to the right of the stage, and if you walk just a little bit to the left, there are stairs going up into a
Okay.
balcony. So you go to the balcony, and that's where the sound equipment is, right? The mixer, I guess, and stuff like that. That's where the engineers are. And there's a balcony to watch the show that only goes a couple deep. I guess in one part there's like 4 or 5 deep. And on the right side of that, that's where Cindy Crawford was. And
Hmm.
you go, and on the left side of the balcony is where the band rooms are.
Hmm.
That's where the band prepares. And it is funny, right before they got on stage, they closed the blinds and everything. Maybe they
Hmm.
wanted to talk about the set list or something before while people were still staring at them because they knew they were going to come down soon. So that's to the left of the balcony.
Hmm.
To the right of the balcony, there's a third bar. So I swear there's almost as much bar space in the Troubadour as there is a place to stand to watch the show. Both of them being very small.
Yeah.
So I almost didn't even realize that third bar was there for some reason. I guess during the show, because that was kind of behind Cindy. I guess I kind of noticed it when I looked up at Cindy Crawford. Um, But yeah, when I first got there, I walked to the balcony because I thought, oh, this is just some fun. Well, I guess that was kind of a VIP place. Now that time they didn't actually check my ticket. I think they just assumed that
Mhm.
I had one. So I do want to say before wrapping up the review that I was able to meet fairly briefly a couple of the band members, which I already hinted about. So when I got to the Troubadour, before I stood in line, I noticed maybe there was more of them, but I noticed Jim and Charlie talking to people outside. It was very casual. I'm guessing a lot of the people at the show, if they were kind of Sirius XM employees or something, they might not even know that they're in the band, right? You
Right.
might not know. Um, so there I actually yeah, I got to talk to Jim a bit. Yep, I won't say much except that I talked to him about a few things and even mentioned the podcast to him. Charlie, I could have talked to. So Charlie, I saw 3 times, and I did make small talk to him at the one time. I probably could have talked to him more, but he seemed to be there with, let's just say, I'm pretty sure wife and their friends, maybe
Mhm.
mutual friends, and I kind of didn't want to interrupt, even though he seemed like he actually would have been open to it. I just kind of got guilt that came up over me. Jim, I actually talked to also after the show quickly. And in fact, to be honest, I was going to talk to Charlie once and I didn't, but that actually, because of that, I didn't get to talk to some of the other band members. But right before I left, I checked out that third bar, which I was told, oh, you actually have to, that's where you definitely have to show your VIP ticket. And I did, and they let me in. And Dan was there talking to people that clearly I think he knew from before, like a group of 6.
Mhm.
And then about when I was leaving, I kind of made brief reply. And then we actually talked for quite a few minutes. And that's where I told him the Cindy Crawford thing. And Dan was so nice. And he was open to talking to more, I think. But I actually felt guilty because my feeling, I was taking him away from his friends. So I just said, I'm going to go. Thank you even for chatting to me for a bit. So that was always great. Yeah, Dan is someone who I never met. I
Mhm.
had, and Charlie, I even never said hi to. I think every other band member, maybe Millard's the only one now, I never said anything to. But so anyway, it's always a dream come true. The whole experience was really cool. And after I came back from that show, Chris was the one that said, um, Eric, you got me thinking. I wonder how that show compares, the Counting Crows in a small venue in Hollywood. That's not the first time they've done it, even though it's been decades. Let's look at a similar show to how much the Crows have changed over 30 years. And the one we agreed upon was, I think it's only a mile away, is a place called Whisky a Go Go. And it's a similar capacity,
Mhm.
500 people. And they played there in March 1994. So almost exactly 30 years ago. What is it, 29 and a half?
29, yeah.
And we both listened to that show. So one thing I do want you to talk about, at least your thoughts,
Mhm.
before we get into the Whiskey a Go Go show. In this podcast, we are going to talk about prior shows
Mhm.
and listen to them and review. Is there an easy way for our listeners to listen to these shows if they want to relive some of the same things that we are?
Sure. The best way is to go to Crowstown, and I'll make sure I get the web address correctly. Um, CR Crows, the way you would spell crows, town.com. That is, it used to be, I guess it's still a message board. It used to be a very active message board and place where people traded Counting Crows tapes. The band's always been open taping and always been very open about that and letting people tape and trade them, as long as it's not for profit. And a few years ago, I and a couple of other people, Sandra um, uh, from the Netherlands and a couple other people, we put together as big an archive as we could. As we noticed the torrents were kind of winding down, or at least the torrent community was kind of winding down. And we put together as big an archive as we could. And we think we have pretty much everything that is available and able to be traded around. And you can go on, if you go on Crowstown, become a member and make a request to join our file share group. You can do that. And you can check out the whole archive, and it's broken up by years. And we've got some video stuff as well, but a lot of tapes. And so I went back. Part of it was this. It's interesting. I went back first I looked and see if we had anything from the Troubadour, and it's interesting in the Sirius XM interview that aired before the show played. The interviewer said, "It doesn't look like you ever played the Troubadour," and Adam's like, "I'm positive we played the Troubadour at some point for something, but no one can find a record of it." He's like, "I know it happened," but I'm like, "Oh, I can't find anything. I'm with the host. I can't find anything." So I believe Adam, but it must have been something that was a small thing or something that was just so, and just for whatever reason kind of lost to the winds of time. So we went back um, on this 94 tour. This is March of 1994. This show came out as a bootleg that was sold around. It was called Suddenly Beautiful. And
Oh
that's why I
wow.
picked this one, mostly because I think that the sound quality was quite good. Um, they played after that two nights at the Roxy as well. I picked, and a part of it was I also picked it. I was like, well, they played two nights at the Roxy, and it's hard to pick between them, so I'm just going to pick the Whiskey a Go Go show because they're all at this stage of the game, right?
Yeah.
They were playing a pretty similar set list each night because they only had so many songs. But every show is kind of interesting and different. And they were really playing around with the songs in a lot of ways, so it's kind of worth checking out. And so, yeah, our thought was like, let's listen to a club show from Hollywood from the beginning. Also, because we had just talked about August and everything after
Yes.
all the way through. And so it was really interesting to listen to because they play almost all of August on this show.
Yes.
So it was really interesting to go back and listen to the live versions, like a March 1994, a time capsule of the way those songs sounded at that point.
Great. No, you're exactly right. So, do we? I get there. Well, one interesting thing is that, gosh, was it 14 or 15? But the we just said that nowadays on their tour they play about 20 songs.
Mm-hmm.
In this quote unquote classic show, they played about 15. So,
Yep.
which was so the set list number was similar to the quote unquote abbreviated Troubadour show.
Right. They
So
opened both shows with Goodnight Elizabeth.
oh, that's true. Thank you. I knew there was something else. Well, and that's worth saying because Recovering the Satellites had not been out yet, but they played two Recovering the Satellite songs, right? Goodnight
Right.
Elizabeth and Children in Bloom. And Children in
Yep.
Bloom was very similar to the album, the eventual album version.
Yeah. I really
Um,
like the 94 versions of Goodnight Elizabeth. They're still pretty similar to the album, but I really like how Adam sings them. In the 94 versions, he is just the vocal of what he's bringing out of himself on that song is I highly recommend checking out some of those.
Yep, and I learned a little bit from reading the Counting Crows book, which we'll talk about later, that I didn't realize, and it makes sense listening to this, how much that they did have some material ready to go for Recovering the Satellites before they put themselves in the house to record it. So let's hear some of your other thoughts. I mean, one, I have mostly good things to say. There are two things that did kind of crack me up a little bit
Mm,
listening to this. One is that it definitely highlighted what I call mopey Adam a little
mm,
bit.
yeah.
That I forgot that he. I don't know how to describe it. He had some. It's like what some people didn't like. I mean, I always loved Adam and his singing, but what some people didn't like about him back then, maybe some of my peers, that he sounds like he's whiny and always. I don't know. Before emo was even a thing, I guess pseudo emo. Did you get that impression at all listening to
Yeah, well, I
that?
mean that's and you can hear it again because he used to play around with the words a lot, right? That's you could definitely always tell Adam's mood from that stuff.
Yes.
Um, the line in Mr. Jones is every time I look at the television, I've got to see me
Yes.
staring right back at me. Did you, by the way, catch in Mr. Jones? He says, "I want to be Charles." I could not make it out. Charles something. I want to be Charles. And I could not understand
Yes,
what he was saying.
I forgot. I think I noticed it the first time, and then when I listened to it yesterday, I did not catch that.
Yeah.
But
But in the same way, they talks about how the record has turned gold, which of course
okay.
it would
Oh
later go
yeah.
platinum and many times platinum.
Yes.
But he
Yes.
says, and it's we're celebrating that August has turned gold, and for the weirdness and misery that comes with that.
That's funny.
So
Did you? As I remember, I did not see them until the Desert Life tour. So as
mhm.
someone that didn't listen to them, and again, it's been 30 years, and of course he's younger and everything. One thing we just this kind of got verified, but you're enjoying the concert last night. I do think that when they play these older songs, they do play them better now. It's not. It was still fun to listen to this version,
It's
and
different. I think they're
it's
different.
different.
It depends on the song, and I think it depends on um yeah, like I love like how they do like the early Sullivan Streets, like Adams, that and like Elizabeth. It's different, right?
Oh, okay,
Adam's
it's right.
bringing
I
so
wasn't.
much out of
Yep, yep,
himself. You
yep,
know what I
yep. No,
mean?
that's
But
true.
they do certainly, the arrangements are better. They play the songs. Certainly there's more, they have more guys, the arrangements tend to be more interesting on these things. So yeah, there's like a kind of a push and pull on some of these songs where there's a certain rawness to the early versions that can be kind of endearing,
Yes,
but then you're
yes.
also like, it's pretty cool what they do on Sullivan Street now. Like it's so and I think some songs you can go better or worse, and I think some songs different periods over the course of 30 years we'll talk about more, but like there's better and more exciting periods for those songs. But
Yeah, no,
um
yeah. I thought of you because I did think the Time and Time Again in the '94 was particularly good.
yeah, I
And
thought the
you,
version of Four White Stallions too, particularly, was I just, my note just like, this version of Stallion slays. That's my
yes,
note. I was like,
yeah. So
they
that's it.
really killed that.
Yeah, right. So, and I was surprised that they even played that. I actually thought, again, in my mind, they didn't play that until the Hard Candy tour, which I did not realize they played that even back in '94.
Yeah, well, that's
When
the story is always they needed those songs to fill out the set. So
okay,
Four White Stallions, Mercy, which they played some. I don't think they played on this show.
not on that one, but
Um,
they played
but yeah,
Wise Blood and Marjorie.
They played Wise. They played Marjorie is also, that's also one of those interesting songs that I know that's, if they ever did do an expanded version of Recovering the Satellites, that is one of the songs I'd be really interested to hear what they recorded of Marjorie, because they've always said they love that song and they just realized something was not right about that song, but
Yeah.
it's still a great tune.
I hope it gets recorded too. But then it's interesting when you see Wise Blood, which I guess is a cover. It's interesting that that cover didn't make their cover album, right?
No,
A
they
lot
didn't
of
do.
the,
Yeah,
so I'm not sure
yeah,
why, but that was a song that they played quite a bit, right? Wise Blood, and then in those
yeah,
early
yeah.
years, but that didn't make. Yeah, you know, one thing that
They're
there,
all from
yeah,
Dan's old. That's the three. It's Wise Blood,
yes,
Mercy, and Four White Stallions are all from the band that became called Tender Mercies when they actually
yes,
released a record in, it was like 2011 or 2012.
yep.
I actually saw that a couple of the shows I saw on that tour. They Tender Mercies opened
Oh,
for the band, which was cool, with Jim playing drums, which I think was a later. I don't think Jim played with them in '94, but um, part of the San Francisco community. But
yep.
Patrick Winningham is the guy who
Okay.
Charlie had played with and Dan had played with, and was the guy where Adam felt bad. He's like, I basically I killed this guy's dream. I stole his band, and then I stole his songs.
Do you? That's funny. When we were talking about this with Holiday in Spain, and I felt it again last night or this morning. One thing I thought when listening to this is how much I miss them closing shows with Murder of One.
Yeah, that is one of the things I like the way Holiday ends shows, but yeah, Murder with this, the alts in this are Happy Birthday Baby.
Oh,
Was an interesting kind
yeah.
of
Even if they just did it
thing.
sometimes, and I know somebody else says, which I'd love to hear them do walkaways. Some, I mean, just a
Walkaways
couple
would be
of
a nice
these.
one. Yeah,
It wouldn't take too much to do walkaways.
yeah,
Oh, when you mentioned about Goodnight Elizabeth, what really surprised me was the is that in Rain King they
yeah.
mentioned Goodnight Elizabeth. I couldn't believe. I actually was shocked by that.
The end, he in that tour a lot. The end of Rain King is Good Night Elizabeth. I'm so sorry now because
Yep.
I'm the Rain King.
And again, I
Um,
thought that they brought that in the Hard Candy tour. That shows you what I didn't know about the band.
Yeah, there's actually, I had totally forgotten about this too. They use "Sweet Thing," the Van Morrison song, which later became a very common alt in Round Here,
Oh,
in Rain King a little bit in this, which I had totally, I blanked on that one. So I was listening, I was like, oh shoot, there's that. Which I actually think works better. I thought that worked better in Rain King than it does in Round Here. Is my kind of
right.
take on that one,
I,
but a good show. I mean, again, it's the interesting thing about those shows, the 94 shows, is that they're also subtly different. It's the same set of songs pretty much with some variations because they've only got so many songs. But I think Adams talked about this, that he used to be so intent on like getting out how he felt that day on stage that
right.
really the shows could vary really widely based on his mood, which I'm sure was super fun for the band sometimes. But um that there is something, that's I think what's interesting about those early shows is like you can kind of pull any of them and you'll get a similar show, but you'll get a very different vibe again, especially that August tour. It's a just
And
they're all over the place.
And I'm assuming, because this kind of caught my eye, I'm assuming that Emmy was not with
Nope,
them,
yeah,
even though it
that's
was
right.
in Hollywood. And that's why I think on that Omaha, when that little, like, mandolin part usually, when
Mm-hmm.
Emmy comes out and plays that mandolin, that's missing
Yeah,
from this version because Emmy wasn't there. Because I think Emmy did play the mandolin on the studio version,
that makes sense. Yeah, I think
even
that's right.
though he wasn't a member of the band. I know he played in some songs on August, and I think Omaha as the mandolin was one of them. My only last observation, and this kind of it's because Adam actually mentions it, how like I mean, I understand it's in Hollywood and they're how drunk and obnoxious the crowd was.
Mm.
Even they were listening, but also obnoxious. Like you could tell they were big fans of the band, and I was like, "Geez, I forgot that my generation can be was like really annoying." All like, yeah, like they I think did that more than other generations about like kind of sometimes interrupting singers and as you said
There
yelling
was a
at
there was a dude last night. I will say that even 30 years later, there's a dude last night screaming for Thunder Road.
oh, there's always like
Always a guy,
creeper.
always
There's
someone.
always a guy, and I don't know if this relates to the drunk thing, but the one other thing that stood out, and it also tied to the crowd, is that that how like the crowd, depending on the timing of the song,
Hmm.
is trying to anticipate what he's going to say or might start singing the chorus before them. The
Right.
one song that they were singing the chorus on and the timing was off, what cracked me up was actually Perfect Blue Buildings,
Hmm.
because you don't think that's not a song that you would think that the crowd would want to sing the chorus even if they know the song really well. And it kind of reminded me of like you with I don't know, like what you're saying with colorblind. Like you wouldn't expect like the crowd to be like, I am colorblind,
Yeah.
or whatever.
But the
But
crowd is really
yeah,
that's the crowd is so it's probably a weird moment for them because they're blowing up, but they're still in clubs, which are really you talked about like the Troubadour with the three bars, right?
yeah,
The clubs are trying to sell booze,
that's true.
right? That's really
That's how they make
like
their money.
there's
Yeah.
a distinction. The Crows very naturally fit as a theater band. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
That they are that's their sort of vibe, but they were in a 500 person club and selling booze and people were having a good time listening to the songs they hear on the radio, but also a bunch of them loving Perfect Blue Buildings and,
Yep. Yeah. And even though it was not a single, as you said, people knew and bought the
people had bought
album,
the
and
record, right?
yeah.
And so that's the thing.
Okay.
People had to buy the record at that point. They wanted to hear the song again. They had to buy the record. They listened to the whole thing. And some of them liked Perfect Blue Buildings. 500,000
Exactly.
people at that point apparently had bought the record because it had gone gold. So,
And so I'll just say again, it is worth because not every time, but on this podcast, we will be reviewing older shows. And so I do welcome our audience to make a Crowstown account. Again, crows-town.com.
mhm.
And to once you get permission, and yeah, you can be good to go. And I think it is a lot of fun that every month or every 2 months, we'll revisit an old show and see what's changed, what's different, what we miss, etc.
Yeah.
All right. So, any other thoughts? After no, I think we
I think
covered
that's
quite a
it.
bit.
I'm looking at I think this is definitely a two-parter.
Yeah, this will be a two-parter. So, thank you so much. And one, so this was our main episode about the Banshee tour, but we will, even if it's just a short revisit, we will come back and talk after I have seen both of my shows in
Mhm.
the LA area. Which is going to be in August. Right. So about mid-August, we'll record maybe our part two of the Banshees review. So
And next time we'll have a pretty special guest. So we'll
yes,
talk
we'll have
about
special
that.
guest next time.
We'll keep that a surprise.
So thank you everyone for listening and coming down to hang out with us here on Sullivan Street. Goodbye.